Johns Hopkins University.
Sometimes data, especially early data, can be like a whisper in your ear, and he hears that. And that's the difference between Al and the next researcher down the hall.
To test his theory, Sommer assembled 20,000 more Indonesian children and gave half of them vitamin A. The other half got nothing.
Workers dose children. A mother in a headscarf comforts her children.
2 years later, the results were in. The children who did not get vitamin A were nearly twice as likely to die as the children who did.
Footage of children freezes, then fades to black and white.
I was blown away. It was, holy, I don't believe this.
Barefoot children run on a dirt path.
Sommer's results were indeed stunning. Vitamin A could not only save children's sight, it could save their lives.
A Lancet article, Impact of Vitamin A on Childhood Mortality.
He published his findings in the prestigious medical journal, The Lancet, and waited for the accolades to come in. But instead, the knives came out. The experts said he hadn't proved his case.
Alfred Sommer.
What was frustrating was when you went to meetings and you present this hard data and people get up and say it can't possibly be true. I mean, how do you deal with that?
There was enormous resistance. Here's this ophthalmologist. He knows about eyes, but what's he know about children and their lives? And he has the temerity to say that by giving them a simple capsule that only has to be given once every 6 months, that he can drop mortality. It was just too good to be true.
Niels Dallaire, Global Health Council.
Frustrated and angry, Al Sommer now faced an uphill battle to convince his critics that countless lives could be saved with just a cheap dose of vitamin A. This was not the first time that a medical detective had to overcome the doubt of his colleagues, especially when the solution he discovered was so simple.
In a recreation, two men stroll through a corridor at the Mississippi State Orphanage.
In 1915, a young public health service doctor named Joseph Goldberger was trying to solve the mystery of a disease called pellagra.
A girl with reddened hands scrubs the floor.
The scourge of the southern poor, pellagra was often found in institutions like prisons and orphanages.
Goldberger kneels beside her.
It first appeared as an ugly rash.
Can you tell me how long you've had this rash?
Blotches cover her face.
Symptoms often became worse, and for many, fatal.
Did it start on your hands?
Finish that later.
Pellagra had killed 30,000 Americans by the time Goldberger began studying it. Most experts were convinced that pellagra was caused by an infectious germ, but Goldberger saw no proof of this.
In every institution, he notices the same thing. The inmates get the disease, the staff, the physicians never do. So Goldberger was increasingly persuaded that whatever he was dealing with, it was not an infectious disease.
Alan Kraut, American University.
Instead, he began focusing on what these people ate.
Goldberger scans a dining hall.
Cornmeal, corn mush, cornbread, corn pone, cheap cuts of pork. It was that diet that he saw again and again.
Goldberger felt that this diet of the southern poor lacked nutritious foods like eggs, meat, and milk, and their absence was causing pellagra. Most experts found his theory absurd, and in truth, he had no definitive proof he was right.
He arrives at Rankin State Prison Farm, Mississippi.
So he enlists the support of the governor of Mississippi, who gives him an opportunity to test his theory by experimenting on prisoners at the Rankin Penal Farm.
Goldberger walks with the warden.
What is this experiment of yours?
First, I'm going to make some men sick, and then I'm going to make them better.
You're kidding me.
No, I'm not.
Inside, men in black and white striped uniforms stand in a row near a guard with a bullwhip.
Gentlemen, my name is Joseph Goldberger. I'm a doctor, and I am here to ask you to help me in an experiment. You will be participating in a simple eating experiment. If you comply all the way to the end, you will be given your freedom.
The prisoners smirk at each other.
Goldberger's aim is to give the men pellagra by feeding them nothing but the diet of the southern poor. Only cornmeal, cornbread, rice, fatback, and syrup. No vegetables, eggs, or decent meat.
A prisoner pours white rice into a pot.
Goldberger will have exactly 6 months to prove his case.
The prisoners sit down for a meal.
The prisoners who made up the pellagra squad couldn't believe their luck. The eating experiment was practically a vacation from prison life.
Hey, Goldberger!
The prisoners show off their empty bowls. Goldberger smiles politely.
Months pass. The men feel fine. There isn't a hint of pellagra. A dejected Goldberger writes to his wife.
My darling Mary, I am sad to report that there is no sign of success. For the first time, I am beginning to doubt whether I'm right.
With the deadline fast approaching, the prisoners are getting edgy and complaining of aches and pains. But with no obvious pellagra symptoms, Goldberger doesn't know if they're ill or just bored.
Alan Kraut.
In diagnosing pellagra, the appearance of the rash is critical.
A prisoner knocks on Goldberger's window.
For months, it doesn't appear.
I need you to take a look at this.
Goldberger examines blisters on the prisoner's neck, excitedly turning him toward the light. Goldberger dashes out of his room.
He's now.
Within days of the first rash appearing, more than half the men succumb to pellagra.
Goldberger writes a letter.
Yes, sweetheart, we sure enough have done it. We really and truly have produced pellagra in great, big, vigorous men by just feeding them properly. Or rather, improperly.
Goldberger inspects prisoners' skin lesions.
The men had earned their freedom. In the weeks that followed, Goldberger put them on a better diet. And by the time they left, their health had improved completely.
Goldberger shakes hands with the men, now dressed in drab civilian clothes, as they leave the prison. One freed man gives Goldberger his harmonica. The warden approaches.
You ready?
Goldberger glances back at the empty dormitory, then nods to the warden.
Yes.
Goldberger is now confident that he proved his theory beyond doubt. A simple change in diet could save thousands the misery of pellagra.
No one made the leap until Goldberger came along, suggesting that maybe there was something missing from the diet.
Dear Dr. Goldberger, we have read with interest your report on the experiment at the Rankin State Prison, and while you should be congratulated, the experiment does have serious flaws.
But his evidence was once again rejected. Scientists would not accept that pellagra is a dietary disease, despite Goldberger's overwhelming proof.
At the orphanage, a woman serves food to the children.
Goldberger would never know what was missing from the pellagra diet. He died of cancer in 1929.
He frowns ruefully as he leaves the prison.
But just 8 years later, niacin, or vitamin B3, plentiful in vegetables and meat, would be identified as the missing ingredient. And when it was added to commercial flour, the curse of pellagra disappeared from the United States.
Now supermarket shelves are packed with bread.
By the 1950s, enriching staple foods like flour had turned a simple shopping trip into a major public health intervention.
More shelves are laden with food.
Iodine and salt prevented cretinism. With vitamin D in milk, there was no more rickets. And vitamin C got rid of scurvy. But enriching food requires processing, boxing, canning, and manufacturing. Things that rarely exist in poor countries.
Now farmers carry water and crops.
So the people there, especially children, continue to suffer the agony of nutritional diseases.
2 young girls carry loads of water.
And Al Somer believes the lack of vitamin A is causing many of them to die. But like Joseph Goldberger, he can't convince his colleagues.
Alfred Somer.
This is a life and death issue. There are children who are potentially dying needlessly around the world, and we're not